Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. I didn't go looking for a bunker. I went looking for a place that was built for the worst day of someone else's life. Engineered, inspected, lit, labeled, and designed to be found fast when everything is on fire. When the evacuation routes failed, that became the problem. Because I needed a place designed to be ignored. On the afternoon it started, Seattle still looked like Seattle. Gray sky, wet pavement, brake lights stacked into the distance like red beads on a string. The radio was doing that careful nervous thing where the announcer keeps repeating the same sentence like repeating it will keep it true. Unconfirmed reports of aggressive behavior. Please remain calm. Law enforcement is responding. Avoid downtown. I was driving north through Sodo with my hazard lights on, not because my car was broken, but because I wanted people to stop expecting me to be predictable. Predictable gets boxed in. Predictable ends up parked sideways across two lanes while everyone leans on their horn and stares at their phone. And phones were already turning into little slabs of useless glass. I'd been an electrical maintenance contractor for transportation projects for most of my adult life. Not glamorous work. Cable trays, control panels, backup power systems. The kind of job where your reward is that nothing happens. And if something happens, everyone suddenly knows your name. A few years back, I'd spent months on the State Route 99 tunnel project, mostly commissioning and troubleshooting the equipment rooms and the monitoring systems. The tunnel is a bored highway tunnel under downtown Seattle, built as a replacement route. It's big, deep, and filled with enough sensors and cameras to make you feel like you're driving through a machine that's watching you back. I knew how it was laid out. I knew what was below the roadway decks, utility lines, mechanical spaces, fire suppression equipment, electrical rooms. I knew where the emergency refuge areas were spaced along the route. I knew the doors that were supposed to be opened only when a driver needed to get out of their car and into a protected space and then follow marked routes to safety. And I knew that almost nobody thinks about those doors until they're desperate. By about 2:40 p.m., the city's surface streets started moving like a clogged artery. People weren't following signs anymore. They were following fear. Lanes became suggestions. Shoulders became lanes. Cars sat half on sidewalks. Somebody abandoned a delivery van right in the middle of an intersection and just left it. I had one real advantage. I'd already decided where I was going before panic made decisions for everyone else. I wasn't trying to get out of Seattle. I was trying to get under it. At 3:15 p.m., I took the ramp toward the south portal of the State Route 99 tunnel near South Dearborn Street. Above me, the stadium district looked like a picture from another life. A normal day, ripped in half. There were electronic signs over the lanes. Variable message signs that normally tell you about travel times and closures. Some still had power. They were flashing warnings in blocky amber letters. Tunnel open. No stops. Keep moving. People were still obeying, because obeying was easier than thinking. That was my second advantage. If a system is still lit and still talking, people treat it like it's still in control. I merged in behind a line of cars and followed them into the mouth of the tunnel. The sound changed immediately. Out on the surface it was rain and engines and distant shouting. Inside the tunnel, the world became a long concrete throat that swallowed noise and gave it back as a constant hum. Tire hiss, fans. The low-frequency vibration you feel in your chest more than you hear. The tunnel is built as a single tube with two stacked roadways. 2 southbound lanes on the upper deck, 2 northbound on the lower. You don't see that from inside, not really. You feel it. The ceiling is close enough that headlights reflect back at you. The walls are curved concrete, painted sections, repeating lights, repeating signs. It's designed to be boring so you don't do something stupid. I drove about a half-mile in and kept my speed steady. I watched for the emergency refuge area doors. Solid, industrial doors set into the side wall, with clear markings and bright striping. They look like something you'd see in a ship, because in a lot of ways a road tunnel under a city is the same idea. Keep the people alive, keep the smoke out, control the air, control the exits. The refuge areas in this tunnel are spaced regularly, and the escape routes lead toward the portals. In a normal emergency, you'd leave your vehicle, open the door, get into the refuge, call for help on an emergency phone, and follow instructions. In an abnormal emergency, you'd do the opposite. You'd go in, and you'd stay quiet. At 3:21 p.m., traffic started slowing. Not a normal slow. This was the kind of slowing where the cars ahead of you aren't just braking. They're making decisions. Some were trying to reverse, some were changing lanes for no reason. A sedan stopped dead, driver's door opening, and a man leaned out, yelling something I couldn't hear over the echo. Up ahead, someone had hit the wall. Not hard enough to crumple the front end, but enough to block the right lane with a skewed angle. People were squeezing around it. I knew what came next. In a tunnel, a small incident becomes a big incident fast. A fender bender becomes a jam. A jam becomes an argument. An argument becomes someone stepping out into traffic. And in a city that's already tipping into chaos, stepping out into traffic becomes a mistake you don't get to correct. I did not want to be stuck in a line of cars inside a tunnel when fear finally decided to sprint. So I made my move while the system still looked normal. I signaled right, eased toward the wall, and stopped with my passenger side close to one of the refuge doors. I killed my headlights. I left the engine running for just a second longer than felt comfortable, listening, measuring. The world above the hood was a ribbon of red taillights. People still thought they were part of traffic. They still thought this was a delay. I popped my trunk, grabbed my backpack and a hard plastic case I'd kept in the car for years, and stepped out. The air in the tunnel had that particular taste: rubber, exhaust, damp concrete, and the faint chemical clean smell that comes from maintained infrastructure. The ventilation system was running, pulling air along the bore. Somewhere above the ceiling panels and behind access grills, fans were moving the tunnel's breath like a giant lung. I walked straight to the refuge door and put my hand on the handle. It was locked. Of course it was. People assume emergency doors should open easily. They should for someone escaping into safety. But there are reasons they're controlled. Security, misuse, the reality that every easy-to-open door becomes an invitation for someone to try to live inside it. I'd spent time in these rooms during commissioning. I knew there were mechanical override options for authorized personnel, and I knew the locks were tied into systems that assumed there would always be a control center watching. Cameras, alerts, door status. In a normal world, opening that door without authorization would get a response. In this world, the response, if it came at all, would be delayed by bigger problems. I pulled a keyring from my pocket. Not a magical keyring, not a movie prop, just the ugly, heavy ring that anyone who works around facilities ends up with. Keys that fit electrical cabinets, maintenance closets, and a few specific doors that you only want certain hands to touch. I found the right key by feel, inserted it, turned. The lock released with a click that sounded far too loud. I pulled the door open just enough to slip through, and then I pulled it shut behind me. And just like that, I left the flow of traffic and stepped into the part of the tunnel most drivers never see. Inside the refuge area, the air was different. Cleaner, cooler. The noise from the roadway softened into a muffled roar like being underwater. There were bright lights overhead. Emergency phones mounted on the wall, signage pointing toward exits. The floor was concrete with a slight slope towards drains. The whole space was designed to hold people temporarily, to keep them out of smoke and away from traffic. It was not designed to be a home. That was going to be my problem, and my project, and my obsession. I moved fast. I didn't stand there breathing like I'd made it. I didn't sit down. Relief is how you get lazy. I walked to the interior door at the far end of the refuge area, the one that led into the service side, the maintenance passage, the places where the tunnel's organs lived. That door, too, was locked, but it was the kind of lock I knew. I opened it and stepped through. Now, I was in the narrow world behind the walls. A maintenance passage runs along parts of the tunnel, with access to equipment cabinets, fire suppression valves, electrical panels, communication lines. Some of it is open walkway. Some of it is segmented into rooms and alcoves. It's not a clean, empty corridor. It's a dense, functional space where every square foot carries something important. Cables in trays overhead. Conduit. Pipes labeled for firewater. Boxes with warning labels. Fans and dampers and sensors. And doors. Service doors that look like nothing from the roadway side. Doors that people drive past without ever knowing what's behind them. I found the one I wanted. It wasn't marked Hidden Base, obviously. It was marked with equipment identifiers and safety signage. But I recognized the layout. A small equipment room with a secondary access into a deeper utility space, not normally used by the public, and not one of the primary egress routes. A place where, if you were careful, you could exist without being part of the tunnel's main story. I opened it and stepped inside. The room smelled like metal and dust and a faint electrical warmth. Not burning. Not danger. The normal warmth of powered equipment. There was a control panel on one wall, gauges for the fire suppression system, and a small bench where someone had set a clipboard months ago and never picked it up. I closed the door. I stood still, and I listened. The tunnel above me was still alive with traffic, but it wasn't moving like it should. The sound was uneven. Accelerations and sudden stops. Horns that started and then cut off. The occasional hard thump of something hitting something else. A human voice echoed faintly through the concrete, distorted. Somewhere far away, deeper in the tunnel, something else was happening. A different kind of noise, sharp, chaotic, spreading. That was the moment I understood what I'd done. I hadn't escaped the city. I'd moved into its infrastructure, I'd moved into the bones. And now, I had to live inside something that was built to be inspected, patrolled, and accessed quickly. A place designed to be found. I dropped my backpack on the floor and started working like I was on a job site. Because the first rule of staying hidden is this: you don't move in. You set up a system. A system is repeatable. A system leaves fewer mistakes. Mistakes in a tunnel don't stay small. My first hour was about sightlines. If someone opened the service door, what would they see? A person standing in a room with supplies, or an empty equipment room that looked exactly like every other empty equipment room. I didn't have the luxury of building walls, but I could build visual noise. I took a stack of plastic traffic delineators I found in a corner, bright orange, reflective strips, and leaned them against the far wall. I moved the bench to block a direct line of sight to where I planned to sleep. I found a roll of dark tarp and a handful of zip ties, and I created a curtain behind a piece of fixed equipment so it looked like a dust barrier left by maintenance. Everything I placed with the idea of removing it fast. That became the theme of my life. Build, erase, build again. The second hour was about doors. Doors are the real currency down here. Every door is either a shield or a liability. If you leave one unlocked, someone finds you. If you lock one and can't open it fast, you trap yourself. I tested every lock I could reach. I learned which ones could be secured from my side. I learned which ones latched automatically. I learned which ones had enough clearance under them that light would leak and give me away. Light is a confession in a place like this. I used black gaffer tape from my kit to seal the bottom edge of my chosen door. Not permanently, just enough to stop the thin line of glow. I taped over a small indicator light on one panel that would otherwise blink all night like a tiny lighthouse. Then I listened again. At 5:40 p.m., the tunnel traffic finally broke. Not like it cleared, like it failed. The sound of engines became sporadic. Horns died out. Doors slammed. People shouted. A child screamed once, high and thin, then went quiet. I could hear running footsteps on the roadway above, a vibration traveling through concrete into my bones. And then came the sound that changed everything. A long, grinding scrape, like a vehicle rolling without control until it kissed the wall and kept going. After that, I heard nothing that sounded like normal commuting. I sat on the floor in my equipment room with my back against a panel and my hands on my knees, forcing myself to stay still. If I moved, I might make noise. If I made noise, someone might follow it. I had a compact flashlight with a red filter, a small battery bank, a multi-tool, water, food bars, a first aid kit, and a handheld radio that could pick up public safety frequencies when they were in use. I also had in the hard plastic case a legally owned handgun I kept for road trips. I didn't take it out and start waving it around. I checked it once, quietly, and put it back where I could reach it. Down here, the smartest weapon was silence. At 6:30 p.m., the tunnel's lighting changed. Not off, not out, but reduced, switching to a lower power mode as the control system responded to something. Some lights dimmed, some remained bright. The pattern changed from uniform to uneven. That told me two things. 1, the tunnel still had power. 2, the tunnel's control systems were doing something without human input, or with limited input. The State Route 99 tunnel is monitored by cameras and systems and a traffic control center. It has fire detection and suppression systems. It has emergency phones. It has a lot of intelligence built into it. It can sense heat and trigger sprinklers in certain conditions. It can display messages. It can adjust ventilation. All of that is amazing. All of that is also a giant spotlight if it decides to look at you. So I assumed the tunnel was watching, even if no human was, and I behaved accordingly. That night, I didn't sleep like a person. I slept like someone on a break at a job site, boots on, head tilted, half awake, listening for anything that didn't belong. At 2:12 a.m., something opened a door in the refuge area behind me. The sound was unmistakable. A heavy latch, a hinge groan. A door closing too hard because someone was rushing. I held my breath. The muffled roar of the roadway had changed. Now it was mostly quiet with occasional distant clanks and the soft whoosh of ventilation. The tunnel felt like a machine idling, waiting for someone to tell it what to do. Footsteps came into the refuge area, shuffling, uneven. More than one person. I could hear them because sound travels strangely through these connected spaces. A whisper becomes a broadcast if the geometry is right. A man's voice, close to panic, said, "In here, this is the door, come on." Another voice, a woman, strained, "Are we safe?" Just get in, close it." Someone sobbed. Not loud, just the shaky sound of someone trying not to lose control. I stayed still, eyes open in the dark, heart doing that heavy thump that makes you feel like your whole body is a drum. They were in the refuge area. That was meant for them. That was what it existed for. But the next door, the one into the maintenance passage, was the line. If they opened that, they might start trying other doors. They might see the service door to my equipment room. They might knock. They might bang. They might decide that because they were scared, I owed them safety. And if I answered, I would not just be sharing space, I'd be sharing secrecy. And secrecy was my oxygen now. The footsteps moved around the refuge area. I heard the scrape of someone sitting on the floor. The clink of something metal, maybe a keychain, maybe a tool, maybe a weapon I didn't want to imagine. Then came the sound I feared. The interior door handle being tried. Once. Twice. A frustrated whisper. "It's locked." A man answered, "It has to open. This is an exit." "It doesn't open from here," the woman whispered. Look, there's signs. It says, 'Wait for instructions.'" Silence. Then the man's voice again, harder. "We can't just sit here." I clenched my jaw. Because he was right. Sitting still in a refuge area when the world is collapsing feels like being buried alive. People don't tolerate it. They start moving. They start searching. They start forcing. I waited. There was a quiet click, like someone pulling something from a pocket. Then a metallic tap against the door. He was hitting it with something. Not hard yet, testing. I had to make a choice. If I did nothing, he might keep going until the door failed or until he hurt himself trying. If I responded, I'd reveal that there was someone beyond it. I chose a third option. I made the tunnel answer him. In my equipment room, I had access to a local control panel tied to the emergency phone system and some of the annunciators in that segment. Not full control, nothing like a command center, but enough to make a sound in the refuge area. I leaned forward, moved as quietly as I could, and pressed a test button that I knew would trigger an audible chime and a recorded message at the emergency phone unit in the refuge. The sound echoed faintly, a sharp, official beep. Then a calm recorded voice filtered through a speaker. "Emergency phone. Stay in the refuge area. Assistance is being notified." It wasn't perfect, it was a generic message, but it sounded like the tunnel was still connected to a system. It sounded like someone might be listening. It sounded like authority. People cling to authority when they're terrified, even fake authority. The tapping stopped. I heard the woman whisper, "See, it's working." The man muttered something I couldn't make out. Then I heard him pace. Then finally, the sound of someone leaning against the wall and breathing hard. They stayed. For about 20 minutes. Then a new sound entered the tunnel above. A thud, 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 like something heavy being dragged or stumbling. The refuge area occupants heard it too. Their voices rose. Someone covered a mouth. Someone whispered, "No, no." The man said, "Don't open the roadway door, don't." A few seconds later, there was a crash, metal on concrete, followed by a chorus of frantic movement and a door slamming. They closed themselves in tighter. I didn't relax. I didn't congratulate myself. I just returned to stillness. Because the tunnel wasn't done introducing me to its new rules. By morning, the air tasted different. The ventilation was still running, but the mix had changed. Less exhaust, more damp concrete, and a faint burn smell drifting in from somewhere. Somewhere above, something was smoldering. At 9:05 a.m., I took my first risk. I needed information. Not internet, not headlines. Real, immediate information. Was anyone still operating the tunnel? Were emergency crews using it? Were people moving through the service passages? I cracked my service door open a fraction and listened. No footsteps, no voices. I slipped out, moved down the maintenance passage in the dim light, and stopped at a small access panel I knew had a view into the refuge area through a narrow, reinforced window. The refuge area was empty. Not there hiding. Empty. No bags, no jackets, no people curled on the floor. Just an open water bottle rolling slowly in a draft like it couldn't decide where to stop. My stomach tightened. They had left. Somehow, Either they went back to the roadway and ran toward a portal, or they found another route, or something had come into the refuge area with them and they'd fled deeper into the tunnel. I didn't stand there and imagine it. Imagination wastes energy. I backed away, returned to my room, and began the work that would become my life for the next stretch of time, making a hidden base inside a place designed to erase signs of anyone being there. I developed routines. Morning. Listen, check the air, check for vibrations that indicate vehicles moving, check the door seals, wipe down any surfaces I'd touched with the cloth slightly dampened so it didn't leave streaks. Midday, carefully venture a short distance to scavenge what I could from maintenance storage and abandoned items in the service spaces, batteries, tape, gloves, a reflective vest that made me look like I belonged if anyone caught a glimpse. Evening. Eat small, drink small, pack all trash into sealed bags. Trash is evidence. Smell is evidence. Sound is evidence. Night. Sleep in short blocks, never deep, never long. I stopped thinking of the tunnel as a place and started thinking of it as a schedule. The tunnel itself had a personality. It was never truly quiet. Even when the roadway above was dead still, the structure made noise. Concrete pops as temperature changes. Metal expands and contracts. Somewhere, water moves through drainage systems and sump pumps cycle, kicking on with a low hum and then shutting off again. A distant fan changes speed and the sound shifts like a giant exhale. Once, late on the second day, I heard a long, slow groan above me, like a vehicle settling on its suspension after someone climbed out. It went on for 10 seconds and then stopped. I held my breath for a full minute after that, waiting for footsteps. None came. The third day, I found my first proof that I wasn't the only person who understood the value of the tunnel's hidden spaces. It was subtle. A service door I knew should be latched was sitting a quarter-inch open. Not swinging, not wide, just enough to say someone was here and they weren't careful. I didn't approach it like a curious person. I approached it like a technician and a prey animal at the same time, eyes up, ears open, body ready to reverse without making noise. Inside that door was a small alcove with shelves, maintenance supplies. On the floor, someone had left a footprint in dust, fresh enough that it wasn't softened by time. And beside the shelves, tucked behind a box, a folded piece of cardboard with a marker scrawl. Stay out. No name, no explanation. Just a boundary. That boundary was not for me, specifically. It was a message to anyone who wandered in. Which meant the person who wrote it expected wanderers. Which meant the tunnel was becoming a map of territories. I backed out and closed the door exactly the way I found it. Then I returned to my room and sat still for a long time. Because now the rules were changing again. The tunnel wasn't just a hiding place. It was becoming a settlement, whether anyone wanted it or not. On the fourth day, I heard voices in the maintenance passage for the first time, not muffled through walls, not echoing from the roadway. Close. 2 men, speaking in low tones, moving slowly. Told you there'd be rooms, one said. We don't know where they lead, the other answered. That's why we check, quiet. They were probably not tunnel staff. Tunnel staff talk differently. They use names of equipment, reference procedures, complain about paperwork. These voices had the sharp edge of people who were afraid and trying to sound brave. I killed my light and moved behind my tarp curtain. I held my breath. Footsteps approached my door. They stopped. A pause. Then the sound of a hand on the handle. Not pulling, just feeling. Testing if it was warm, if it moved, if it was recently touched. I had taped the light leaks. I had blocked the sight line. But doors have their own language. The handle made the faintest metallic tick as it moved a millimeter. The man whispered, locked. Can you open it? No. Needs a key or something. Another pause. I imagined them leaning close, listening for breathing, for movement, for proof of life behind steel. I stayed perfectly still. The first man said, "Could be supplies." The second said, "Could be someone." Silence. Then the first man's voice, suddenly louder, like he wanted whoever was behind the door to hear, "Hey, if someone's in there, we're not looking for trouble. We just need water." My throat tightened. The simplest request in the world, water, and down here it sounded like a trap. If I answered, I would become a person to them, not a rumor. They'd return, they'd bring others. They'd start expecting trade, then favors, then protection. If I didn't answer, they might decide I was hoarding. Fear turns polite people into negotiators, and negotiators into thieves. I kept still. The man knocked once, soft. "Please," he said, and I hated how human it sounded. The second man whispered, "Forget it, we keep moving." Footsteps retreated. I waited until their voices faded, then waited another 5 minutes after that. Only then did I let myself exhale. I didn't feel proud. I felt the weight of what I was becoming. It was the real fight in the tunnel, not against the infected, not against hunger, not against cold. Against the slow temptation to make your survival someone else's problem. That night, at 11:47 p.m., the tunnel's fire suppression system activated somewhere far away. I didn't see it, I heard it. A sudden change in the ventilation tone like fans ramping, then a distant hiss that built into a steady roar, the sound of water under pressure discharging through sprinklers. The tunnel has a fire suppression system designed to respond to heat and fire conditions. In normal times, a fire in a tunnel is one of the worst events you can imagine, because smoke and heat become trapped. The system is meant to control it long enough for people to escape and for responders to get in. In the world I was living in, it meant something else. A fire was burning above my head, and the tunnel was trying to save itself. The water discharge lasted for maybe 3 minutes, then stopped. The ventilation stayed loud. In the silence after, I heard something new, a steady dripping, like rain inside concrete. And then, faintly, a set of footsteps moving faster than any cautious scavenger. Someone was running in the maintenance passage. They passed my door without stopping. Seconds later, another set of footsteps followed, uneven, dragging. Then a thump, like a body hitting a wall. A strangled sound, half breath, half panic. I didn't move, I didn't peek, I didn't open my door. I sat in the dark and let the tunnel swallow the sounds. In the morning, I found the evidence anyway. A smear of wet footprints tracked through the dust near a junction. Not a lot. Just enough to show someone had passed, soaked. The sprinklers had likely drenched them. Maybe they'd run from smoke, maybe from something else. I followed the prints only as far as I could without exposing myself. They disappeared into a section that led toward another refuge area. I stopped there, backed away, and returned to my room. Because curiosity is how people die in confined spaces. After a week, my hidden base became less about building and more about maintaining the illusion of absence. The illusion had 3 pillars. No light leaks. No smell leaks. No predictable movement. Light was easy. Tape, positioning, red-filtered flashlight. I never used bright light unless I could block it completely. I never opened doors with light behind me. Smell was harder. Humans smell like humans. Food wrappers smell like food. Waste smells like waste. In a tunnel with active ventilation, smells travel. So, I made my waste management obsessive. Everything sealed, everything wiped, everything double-bagged. I used small amounts of disinfectant wipes sparingly. Not enough to create a strong chemical scent, just enough to reduce the signature of someone lives here. Predictable movement was the hardest. People noticed patterns, even scared people, even untrained people. If I left my room at the same time every day, someone might connect it to the change in the tunnel's small noises. Door clicks, faint footsteps, the shift in air pressure when a door opens. So I varied it. Sometimes I stayed in for a day. Sometimes I moved twice in a day, but only for a minute. Sometimes I didn't move at all except to breathe. I became a ghost with a schedule designed to be unreadable. Then the tunnel introduced me to the one thing I couldn't manage: other people with their own plans. On day 9, I heard the distinctive buzz of a portable radio keyed up somewhere nearby. A voice crackled through the concrete, not from my handheld radio, but real, present, echoing in the service space. Anyone copy? This is Tunnel Response Unit 3. If you are in the service passages, identify yourself. Repeat, identify yourself. Tunnel Response Unit 3. That wasn't a random survivor with a walkie-talkie. That sounded like an organized team. Incident response, maintenance, or law enforcement using tunnel terminology. My stomach sank. If crews were entering the service spaces, my entire strategy was about to collide with trained people who knew exactly what not supposed to be here looked like. The voice came again, closer. We have reports of people sheltering in refuge areas. We are moving north to south. If you hear this, stay where you are. Do not open roadway doors. That was good advice. Correct advice. But it meant they were sweeping. Sweeping meant opening doors. Sweeping meant checking equipment rooms. Sweeping meant someone's flashlight beam might cut under my door, catch the wrong shadow, reveal the wrong shape. I did what I always did. I prepared to erase myself. I packed my essentials into my backpack. Water, food, first aid, radio, flashlight, battery bank, keys. I left behind anything that looked like living. Extra packaging, comfort items. Comfort is evidence. I rolled up the tarp curtain and stowed it behind a panel. I moved the delineators back to their original corner. I wiped down the bench. I made the room look like a room no one had touched in months. Then I sat in the dark, backpack on, ready to move if the door opened. Footsteps approached. Heavy, purposeful. More than 2 people. I could hear gear clinking. Carabiners, tools, maybe breathing apparatus, the sound of professionals. A flashlight beam swept under my door, bright and white. It paused. I didn't breathe. The beam moved on. A voice outside said, "Check the panel. Any alarms?" Another voice answered, "Negative. Door secure. No status change." Their boots moved away. I stayed still for 10 minutes after the last sound faded. Then, slowly, I exhaled. I didn't relax. I didn't unpack. Because now, I knew. The tunnel wasn't abandoned. It was being managed, at least in pieces. And if it was being managed, then someone, somewhere, was still trying to keep this machine running. That should have felt hopeful. Instead, it felt like a countdown. Because managed spaces don't tolerate ghosts for long. On day 10, the surface world reminded me it still existed. It wasn't the sound of voices. It was the sound of impact. Distant, muffled, like thunder trapped in concrete. Then another. Then a series of smaller vibrations. Somewhere above, on the city streets, something large was burning or collapsing. The smell of smoke thickened in the tunnel. The ventilation adjusted, pushing air faster. I listened to my handheld radio, scanning frequencies until I caught snippets, broken transmissions, urgent, clipped. Fire at, cannot access, keep civilians away. Multiple incidents near the waterfront. Tunnel operations, maintain ventilation. I caught one clearer piece. Traffic control center is running on backup. Repeat, backup power is active. Backup power. So, the tunnel was officially in emergency mode. Generators, battery systems, whatever was still intact. The machine was still alive. And the living machine meant the systems would keep doing their job. opening and closing dampers, running fans, monitoring sensors. It also meant the machine would notice anomalies, like a door opening when it shouldn't, like a person staying in a room that should be empty. So I made a choice that felt insane, but it was the only path that didn't lead to eventual discovery. I stopped living in one place. Instead, I became a moving point in the tunnel's hidden spaces. I identified 3 potential rests along the route, small equipment rooms and alcoves that weren't primary egress paths. I rotated between them, never staying more than a day or 2 in one. I carried everything with me. I left nothing behind. It was exhausting. It was risky. But it meant that if a sweep team opened a door, they'd find a normal room. If someone stumbled into a refuge area, they wouldn't be able to track my pattern. My hidden base wasn't a single base anymore. It was the tunnel itself, used like a maze. Of course, mazes have other people in them. On day 13, I met one. It happened in the worst possible way. A door opened in front of me. I was moving through a service junction between 2 equipment alcoves, flashlight on red, steps slow, when a steel door 2 yards ahead swung inward. Light spilled out, white light, bright, and the sudden contrast stabbed my eyes. A person stepped out. He froze when he saw me. I froze too. For half a second, we were both just silhouettes in an industrial corridor, caught in the same impossible moment. Then he raised one hand, palm out, and said in a low voice, "Don't." He wasn't wearing a uniform. He was wearing a reflective safety vest over a hoodie, work pants, and sturdy boots. He had a hard hat clipped to his backpack. In his other hand, he held a compact crowbar like he'd been using it more for opening doors than for fighting. His face was thin with stress, eyes alert, early 30s maybe, not starving, but not comfortable either. He looked at my backpack, my keys, my controlled stillness, and his expression shifted from fear to understanding. "You know this place," he whispered. I didn't answer immediately. Words are commitments. He nodded slowly like he'd expected that. "Name's Marco," he said. "I used to do incident response towing on the surface. I got stuck down here when it went bad. Found a refuge door open. Been staying out of sight." So he was the one who understood the tunnel the way I did, even if from a different angle. He glanced past me, listening. Then he looked back and spoke with the careful urgency of someone negotiating in a fragile world. "I'm not here to take your spot," he said. "I'm not asking you to save me. I just need to know if there's crews sweeping. I heard radios 2 days ago." I studied him. His hands weren't shaking. His voice wasn't loud. He didn't step toward me. He had learned the same rule I had. Distance equals safety. "Yes," I whispered. "They swept, not constant. But they're here." Marco's jaw tightened. "Then we're both on borrowed time." "Why are you opening doors?" I asked. "Supplies," he said. "Batteries, water. Anything that doesn't smell like a signal flare." He glanced at my keyring. "You got keys. That's useful." I didn't like the word useful down here. Useful turns into needed, and needed turns into owed. Marco read my expression and lifted his palm again. "I'm not trying to team up," he said. "Not unless it makes sense. I'm just making sure I'm not the only one." The tunnel groaned faintly above us. A distant metal clang echoed like someone dropped a tool or car door shut. Marco's eyes flicked up. "You hear that?" "I hear everything," I said. For the first time, he smiled, small and grim. "Yeah, me too." We stood there, 2 ghosts sharing the same hallway. Then he did something that surprised me. He reached into his backpack slowly and pulled out a folded paper map, one of the tunnel's emergency layout sheets that maintenance crews use. He held it out, not pushing it at me, just offering. I marked the spots I've seen other people, he whispered. Not a lot, 2. One group that camped in a refuge for a night. One guy who keeps leaving cardboard warnings like he owns the place. My chest tightened. So, you saw it too, I said. Marco nodded. Yeah, and I don't like him. Why? He wants people to know he's here, Marco whispered. That's dangerous. He wasn't wrong. People who advertise themselves in a tunnel aren't doing it for company. They're doing it for control. I didn't take the map. Taking it would be trust. Trust was expensive. But I leaned forward just enough to see the marks. Marco had circled 2 refuge areas and 1 service junction, exactly the kind of place someone could ambush you. He tapped the junction circle with a finger. I heard him there last night, he whispered, talking to someone, like he had rules. Rules. The tunnel was becoming a kingdom to someone, and kingdoms need subjects. Marco folded the map back up. I'm going, he said. North side, less noise, less smoke. I hesitated, then asked, You got out to the surface at all? His face tightened again. Once, near the south portal, it's bad, streets blocked, fires. I went back down. Anyone in charge? I asked. He shrugged. I saw a couple police cars, no one directing anything, just reacting. He took a step backward toward his door. Listen, he whispered, if you hear someone calling themselves Jasper, don't answer. That's the cardboard guy. He's building a little system. How do you know his name? Marco's eyes narrowed. He told me. Then Marco slipped back through his door and closed it without a sound. I stood alone again, heart pounding, mind racing. Now the tunnel had names. Marco, Jasper, and me. Names make you real. Real people get found. I moved that day like I was carrying a fragile glass bottle inside my ribs. Every sound felt louder. Every door felt like a trap. And then, because the tunnel has a cruel sense of timing, Jasper decided to introduce himself. It happened on day 15. I was in a refuge area, not staying, just passing through to reach another service access point, when I heard a voice behind me, calm and conversational. You can stop pretending you're invisible. I already know you're here. I turned slowly. A man stood at the roadway side door, inside the refuge area, as if he'd come in from the tunnel traffic lanes. He was tall, lean, wearing a dark jacket and gloves. He had a headlamp on his forehead, turned off. He didn't need it because the refuge area lights were on. His posture was relaxed, too relaxed. He smiled like we were neighbors meeting in the hallway. I'm Jasper, he said. You've probably seen my notes. I didn't answer. Jasper shrugged. That's fine. You don't have to be polite. Polite is over. He glanced at the emergency phone. This thing still works sometimes. You can listen to the world dying in real time if you want, or you can listen to me instead. His eyes moved to my backpack. You're not one of the people who stumbled in here. You know the doors. You know the systems. You're not scared of the concrete. That makes you rare. I kept my voice low. What do you want? Jasper spread his hands. Order. That word hit the refuge area like a cold draft. Order, he repeated. People come down here because they think it's safe, but safety without rules is just a waiting room for disaster. I'm making rules. You're alone, I said. Jasper's smile didn't change. Not anymore. A movement behind him. Another figure stepping into view near the roadway door. A woman, maybe late 20s, wearing a rain jacket, eyes hollow with exhaustion. She looked at me like I was a problem Jasper had to solve. Jasper continued, voice smooth. I'm not asking you to join a cult. I'm not asking you to hand over your supplies. I'm asking you to acknowledge reality. Tunnels are controlled environments. Someone controls them or they become a grave. I hated how reasonable he sounded. Who are you? I asked. Jasper tilted his head. I used to be facilities security, not for this tunnel, for a hospital. I know what happens when people panic in confined places. I know what happens when everyone thinks they're the exception. He nodded toward my keyring, visible at my waist. And you, my friend, you are walking around with keys like you're the only one who deserves access. My stomach tightened. That was exactly the narrative he wanted. Me as selfish hoarder, him as organizer. He took a slow step forward. Not threatening, just claiming space. I'm offering you a deal, he said. You keep your privacy, you keep your room. You keep your little ghost routine. In exchange, you tell me what you know about the systems. Power, ventilation, doors, sweeps. I stared at him. Jasper's eyes stayed calm. If you don't, that's fine too. I can still find you, eventually. This place is full of patterns. Everyone leaves patterns. He was right again. Living leaves patterns. Hiding leaves patterns too. I measured the distance to the interior door behind me. 2 steps. If I moved suddenly, would he rush? Would the woman behind him block? Would someone else appear? I didn't see weapons. That didn't mean there weren't any. I chose words carefully. There are crews sweeping. Jasper nodded, pleased. How often? I don't know, I said. Not on a schedule I can predict. He smiled, slightly. Then we make our own. He gestured to the woman. This is Lila. She used to work in a coffee shop above ground. Now she's smart enough to understand that coffee shops are over and rules are in. Lila didn't smile. She just watched me. Jasper's voice softened. You don't have to like me. You just have to accept that someone has to keep the tunnel from turning into a trap. And you're the someone, I said. He shrugged. I'm here. That counts for more than you'd think. The tunnel above us made a distant metallic groan. Jasper paused, listening, then continued. I'm going to give you time, he said. Think about it. But understand this, if I find you living in a space that could help others, and you refuse to cooperate, I'll assume you're a threat to the stability we're building. Stability. He was using words like a person building a government. I felt something inside me harden. I'm not your threat, I said. Jasper's smile returned. Everyone is a threat until they choose not to be. He stepped back toward the roadway door. We'll talk again. And then he left, taking Lila with him, exiting the refuge area back toward the tunnel lanes like he owned the entire underground world. I stood there for a long moment after, listening to my own breathing. Now, I had a bigger problem than the infected. I had a person who wanted to turn the tunnel into a controlled territory, and I was an asset he couldn't tolerate being outside his control. That night, I didn't go back to my best equipment room. I went somewhere worse, somewhere colder, noisier, closer to operational spaces where the ventilation sound was louder and would cover my movements. I picked a narrow alcove behind a panel bank where I could sit with my back against concrete and watch a single corridor approach. I didn't sleep. I listened. At 1:30 a.m., I heard Jasper again, his voice echoing in the maintenance passage. Not the refuge area this time. He was close. He was talking to someone, slow and patient, like a manager coaching a new employee. You don't need to know what's behind every door, he was saying. You only need to know which doors matter. Another voice, male, young. But what if there's supplies? Jasper, supplies belong to the system, not to individuals. The young man. What if someone's hiding? Jasper. Then they're hiding from the system, and we can't have that. I sat in the dark and realized something with a clarity that felt like ice. If I stayed in this tunnel long enough, Jasper would find me. Not by accident, by design. So I did what I should have done earlier. I planned an exit. Not to the surface, not to the streets. An exit through the tunnel itself. The State Route 99 tunnel has emergency escape routes that lead toward the portals. Refuge areas connect to those routes. The system is designed so that if something happens in the middle, people can move toward safety. It's linear, it's marked, it assumes the dangers, fire and smoke, not people. That was my chance. If Jasper was building control in the central sections, then the edges, the portals, might be less governed. But the portals were also where the world above leaked in. Noise, smoke, people. I needed timing. I waited 2 more days, watching, listening, gathering small supplies and information. I observed Jasper's pattern. He moved with a small group now, usually 2 or 3, always using the same refuge areas as checkpoints. He left more notes. He spoke like a leader. People, desperate for certainty, began to follow. Marco stayed invisible. I didn't see him again, but I saw signs. Doors that closed softly, a fresh battery wrapper tucked into a corner, a faint scuff and dust near a junction that suggested someone else was moving with the same care I used. Then, on day 18, the tunnel's systems gave me the opening I needed. At 4:10 p.m., the overhead lighting on one segment flickered and dropped to emergency levels. Not total darkness, just reduced lighting and a shift in the hum of electrical systems. The ventilation tone changed too, like fans switching modes. Backup power had hiccuped, or a system had isolated a section. It was temporary. It lasted maybe 8 minutes. But in those 8 minutes, the tunnel felt less watched. The cameras might still be running, but the human teams, if any, would be focused on the power issue, not on chasing a ghost. And Jasper's group, which relied on confidence and control, would likely hunker down until the lights stabilized. I moved. I traveled through the service spaces toward a northern refuge area I'd avoided for weeks. One closer to the north portal near Aurora Avenue and Harrison Street. That part of the tunnel, from my memory, had operational buildings nearby and a different pattern of access. I moved slowly but steadily. No running. Running makes noise. Noise makes stories. As I approached the refuge area, I heard something that made my skin prickle. A low moaning sound, distant, then closer. Not a human cry. Not a shout. A repetitive, strained vocalization that made no sense as communication. I froze behind a panel bank and listened. The sound came from the roadway side. Something was in the tunnel lanes. I could have turned back, but turning back would mean returning into Jasper's orbit. So I stayed still until the sound drifted away, then I moved again, hugging the maintenance side. When I reached the refuge area interior door, I opened it carefully and stepped in. The refuge area lights were bright. The roadway side door was closed. The emergency phone was intact. And on the floor, in the corner, was a small pile of items. Empty water bottles, a blanket, a torn jacket. Someone had been here recently. Maybe Marco. Maybe someone else. I didn't touch anything. I didn't add anything. I walked to the escape route door that led toward the portal route, one of the protected paths designed to guide people to safety. I opened it. The corridor beyond was narrow and clean, with signage, reflective markings, and that feeling of being inside a place that assumes it will be used in an emergency and then forgotten. I stepped into it and closed the door behind me. Now I was in the tunnel's spine, an escape path that ran towards daylight. I moved forward, following the signs, listening for footsteps behind me. None. The corridor led through turns and short stretches. It passed access points, doors that likely led to stairs or maintenance spaces. Everything was labeled. Everything was designed to be simple for someone who was panicking. I wasn't panicking. I was calculating. Then I heard voices ahead. 2 people, talking quietly, and the sound of a handheld radio. I stopped, pressed myself against the wall, and killed my light. The voices were close enough that I could catch words. "North portal is sealed," a man said. "They put barriers on the surface. Too many people." A woman answered, "Jasper says we hold the center. Keep the refuge areas. Let the portals be chaos." So Jasper's influence had reached the edges too. The man continued, "We saw someone moving near the equipment rooms last night." The woman laughed softly. "The ghost?" "Yeah," the man said. "Jasper wants him found." My pulse thudded. They were Jasper's people. They were stationed near the portal corridor. They were watching for me. I backed up silently, inch by inch, until I reached the refuge area door behind me. I was trapped between Jasper's control and the surface chaos. The tunnel had become exactly what Jasper claimed to be preventing, a confined space where rules belonged to whoever shouted them loudest. I stood there in the dim corridor, feeling the weight of concrete around me, and I understood the final irony of my choice. A highway emergency access tunnel is designed for rescue, for response, for help. It is built to be found quickly, and I had chosen it to disappear. Disappearing in a place designed to be found doesn't work forever. So I did the one thing Jasper couldn't predict. I made myself obvious in the wrong place. I walked back into the refuge area, went straight to the emergency phone and pressed the call button. The phone gave a sharp beep, then a pause. Then, unbelievably, a voice answered, filtered, professional, strained. "Tunnel operations. Identify your location." For a second, I couldn't speak. I hadn't heard an official calm voice in days. It hit me like a reminder of civilization. I swallowed. "I'm in an emergency refuge area on the north side. I'm not injured. I need to report unauthorized people controlling refuge areas and service access." Silence. Then the voice returned, sharper. "Say again? Unauthorized people controlling refuge areas?" "Yes," I said. "They're stopping people. They're searching rooms. I stopped myself from saying building a system because it sounded insane. "They are not tunnel staff." Another pause. "How many?" "I've seen at least 5, maybe more." The voice took on a different tone, decision-making. "Stay in the refuge area. Do not open roadway doors. A response team will move to you." I almost laughed at the idea of a response team, but I didn't. "Copy," I said, and the word felt wrong in my mouth. Too military, too official. Understood. I hung up. Now I'd done something irreversible. I'd brought the tunnel's real owners back into the story, and Jasper would not like it. I didn't have long to wait. Within 15 minutes, footsteps pounded in the escape corridor, fast, angry. The refuge area roadway side door rattled as someone tried it. Then the interior door handle shook hard. Jasper's voice came through the steel, calm but edged with something darker now. "I told you we'd talk again," he said. I didn't answer. He continued louder, for anyone else nearby to hear. "You called someone. You broke the system." I leaned close to the door, voice low. "You're not the system." Jasper laughed once. "That's adorable." Then his voice dropped, almost gentle. "Open the door. We'll settle this." I stayed still. The handle jerked again, a metallic scrape, someone trying a tool in the seam. Jasper sighed theatrically. "Fine." I heard footsteps retreat, a short discussion in whispers. Then a new sound. The clack of a metal object against the door. Crowbar, maybe. They were going to force it. In that moment, my brain did what it always did when panic wanted to take the wheel. It turned the world into a checklist. What do I have? A refuge area. A roadway side door I don't want to open. An interior door being attacked. An emergency phone that might summon help but not instantly. A fire suppression cabinet with a mounted extinguisher. A wall-mounted emergency alarm button designed to alert the control center. I moved to the alarm and slapped the cover up, then pressed it. A loud, piercing alarm tone sounded in the refuge area. An urgent, repeating sound designed to cut through everything. I heard Jasper curse outside the door. The alarm would trigger the tunnel systems. It would flag the refuge area as active. It would likely show up in the control center. It might even activate camera focus on this location. It was the opposite of hiding. It was me, lighting a flare in a concrete cave. The crowbar struck the door again. Then, through the corridor beyond, I heard a different sound. Boots, many, moving with purpose, and voices that carried authority. Tunnel operations, step away from the door. Jasper's voice snapped back. We're sheltering civilians. Step away, someone shouted. Now! For a few seconds, the refuge area became a stage where I heard the world collide. Jasper's constructed rule system meeting actual trained responders. I couldn't see it. I didn't dare open anything. But I could hear the shift. Jasper's people hesitating, the responders advancing, radios crackling. Then Jasper spoke again, closer to the door, voice cold. This isn't over, he said. And then footsteps, fast, retreating away. The responders shouted again, chasing, but the tunnel's geometry swallowed direction. Down here, someone can vanish around a bend and become an echo. A heavy knock came on the interior door. A different voice now, male, firm. If you're inside, announce yourself. We are tunnel operations. I leaned close and answered, I'm inside, I'm alone. Are you injured? No. Do you have the ability to open the door safely? Yes, I said, and my hand went to my keys. I unlocked and opened the door crack. 2 responders stood in the corridor, helmets, reflective markings, radios, the posture of people who've been dealing with emergencies for too long. One of them held a flashlight angled down, not shining it in my face. The other kept his hand near a tool on his belt. They looked at me, then at the refuge area, then back. The first responder said, You've been living in the service spaces? I didn't lie. Yes. The responder's eyes tightened. Not judgment, just calculation. We need you out of here. This area is compromised. I almost asked, compromised by what? But I already knew the answer wasn't simple. I nodded. Where? Operations building near the north portal, he said. If you can walk, you walk now. I grabbed my backpack. As I stepped into the corridor, I glanced once toward the roadway side door of the refuge area, imagining Jasper out there somewhere in the tunnel lanes, moving like a shadow among abandoned cars and flickering lights. A man who believed control was the only way to survive. A man who had just learned someone else could still call the old world back into the tunnel. We moved fast through the escape corridor, guided by responders who knew the route. The signs led towards daylight that felt like a rumor. The air shifted again, cooler, wetter, smelling of the outside world. As we approached the portal area, the noise of the city seeped in. Distant sirens, crackling fire, the chaotic murmur of people gathered somewhere beyond barriers. When we reached the operations building, I saw a glimpse of what was left of organized life. A lit room with screens showing camera feeds, a desk with radios, people in safety vests and hard hats moving like they were holding the last thread of normalcy together with their hands. The responder guided me inside. You did the right thing, he said. and it sounded like he wasn't sure that was true anymore, but he needed to say it. I set my backpack down and looked at the camera feeds. Grainy, night vision views of the tunnel lanes. Abandoned cars, flickering lights, occasional movement that could be a person or could be something worse. Somewhere on one screen, far down the bore, a figure stood near a refuge door, motionless for a long moment. Even through a camera, even through concrete and distance, I felt it like a stare. The figure turned and walked away into the tunnel's curve. One of the operators beside me noticed my gaze. "You seeing something?" she asked. I swallowed. "Just someone who doesn't like losing control." She exhaled like she'd been holding it all day. "Yeah, we've got a few of those." I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know if the tunnel would stay powered. I didn't know if the surface world would recover enough to matter. But I knew this. A hidden base inside a highway emergency access tunnel is not a fortress. It's a negotiation with a machine built to be accessible, monitored, and used by people in crisis. And the hardest part of living there wasn't the concrete or the noise or the constant threat above. It was the rule that never changed, no matter how carefully I taped seams and erased footprints. If you survive long enough in a place designed to be found, eventually, someone finds you. And then you have to decide what kind of person you'll be when they do. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.